All right, I'm here with Jonathan. We call him JC in the office. A pile of rocks.
Got my pile of rocks right here.
In your message, Jonathan, you talked about a Saturday morning cartoon or show. What was it called?
Kung Fu Theater.
I mean, that's the... I want to dig into the depths of YouTube and find Kung Fu Theater.
Oh, it's there. It is. It's there.
It sounds like a great punk band name if it wasn't a show, Kung Fu. And what was the show? I'm just genuinely curious.
They were different movies every week that it was some kind of kung fu movie like Bruce Lee or some other people like that, you know. Yeah.
I don't know if it was that or if it was like a game reality show where it was like a sports contest, like Kung Fu Theater, or seeing who's in the lead this week.
Nope. I can't remember if it was part of Superhost on Saturday or it was something different. I don't remember. But
different era of Saturday mornings.
Saturday mornings were very different back then.
Saturday morning is like a sacred media hour in American conscience. You know what I mean? You're just like, what was the Saturday morning thing you did?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, well, this week you kind of wrapped up our conversation through resolving conflict, talking about forgiveness. Now, people who have been around might be like, you guys talk about forgiveness a lot. And you're like... Yep.
It's a big deal.
Well, there's a lot of doors into forgiveness, you know? So sometimes scriptures talk about it all the time. So when we're just going through books, we're hitting forgiveness, you know? We did in the Sermon on the Mount. When we're going through conflict, we're going to hit forgiveness. When we're going through marriage, you're going to hit forgiveness. It's just, there's a lot of doors into the same conversation of forgiveness. And so one of the things I love the way you started out with, because I know it's true for me, when I hear someone talk about forgiveness, in theory, it sounds really good. Biblically, it sounds important. Mm-hmm. But then we're always like, but this situation I'm in, does that, you know, and we can vary. And you address that, like how all of our pain is unique. How would you say the gospel, the story of Jesus, what Jesus taught, what he did, what he promises us, how does that speak specifically to whoever's listening, to their pain? Mm-hmm. Because we all can be like, yeah, but my pain is different, or my situation is unique. How does the gospel speak to all of it, would you say, as you think about and you've been processing through this week?
Yeah. Before I get to that, first of all, it's very unsettling that you're sitting in a chair that's higher than mine, and I'm looking up to you.
I did that on purpose.
It's very unsettling. It's like, what's going on here?
I have a couple phone books.
This feels weird.
Actually, I would like to stay on.
Back to this. You know, my mind goes to like passages in Hebrews. You know, the one is familiar. We don't have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who's been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet was without sin. And then earlier, chapter 2, it says, for this reason he had to be made like his brothers, like us in every way, in order that we might become merciful, that he might become merciful. You know, some people say, oh, well, that's just talking about temptation. No, both of these passages are talking about, like, Jesus knows us.
Like his experience, yeah.
He's experienced it. Like, so when you talk about the gospel, it's like it's not in a vacuum.
Well, that's a good way of putting it.
Jesus is, like, it speaks to all our situations because he's been there. He's experienced those things.
Yeah, that uniqueness of, like we talk about Emmanuel, God with us at Christmas, the abstract concept of that, but the actual concept of that he is present with us. And like that, those scriptures in Hebrews point us to the fact that he empathizes with us. Specifically in Hebrews where he says he's been tempted in every way, so like he's experienced all those temptations, we could almost say like he's experienced all that pain, he's experienced the full breadth of human experience. I remember thinking like, yeah, but Jesus, he wasn't tempted like we are. He didn't have the same because he wasn't sinful. And I think C.S. Lewis talks about like this picture that by having all those temptations, like the thing about temptation is standing up under it. And not giving into it is like the longer you stand up to it, the more weight you feel. And Jesus, by not sinning, by knowing all of our pain, by being tempted to not forgive, I mean, he's never done it, and so he bears that long path of feeling the weight of temptation without actually falling into it. You have to go read Lewis. He says it clearer than I just said.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, I love the way you said in your message that you kind of say, you're right, your pain is unique, and I don't understand your pain, but there's one who does.
Right.
And there is something when that just, and I don't know if there is a button to push to experience that, but when that goes from an idea to a lived out experience as we navigate through pain, as we navigate through forgiveness, that God with us in all that is just so powerful.
Yeah, and it's interesting, in that passage in Matthew 18, when it talks about the discipline, we sometimes use it for prayer, but it's actually in the context of forgiveness. He says, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there I am in the midst of them. Whew. Like he's in the midst of that conflict. He's in the midst of that resolution and that conflict of trying to steer it in a way that glorifies God.
You do think it's easy. I know for me, I'm I like to picture Jesus in the morning when the sun's rising and I've got I was going to say coffee, but it's really Mountain Dew in a coffee cup and my music. And you create, that's where, Jesus is with us in those quiet times. But that picture you said of where 2 or 3 are navigating out forgiveness, I'm with you there. That's a gospel thing. You know what I mean? It's nice for us to be Jesus with me when I feel, and it's true, but in the midst of that, forgiveness and conflict, I am there because that's where Jesus dwells, is with people when they're living out the reality of the gospel.
Even in the midst of what can sometimes be just messy and ugly. If you're there in his name and wanting to do the right things, he's there. He's in the midst of it.
Oh, that's it. I'm going to go back and read that passage now with those glasses on. That's a... One of the things you taught, now you don't exclusively get to reconciliation in this message, but you do a great job of, as you talk through just those questions that we ask. You know what I mean? Whenever we talk about forgiveness, there's a lot of, but how does, can we, what does those things? How would you, and we've said it a lot, but the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation, before we started rolling, you said something to me that I thought was powerful. Help us kind of think through that. What is forgiveness and how does that differ in tandem with reconciliation, bringing those things back together?
Yeah, forgiveness and time and trust don't guarantee reconciliation.
Yeah,
but reconciliation needs forgiveness to happen. So even though they're not the same thing, they kind of
two pedals on the same bike.
Yeah, they play together well.
Yeah, you said that in your message. I think that's a powerful point. What's the equation? Is it on top of your head? The forgiveness equation?
Yeah, it's time plus, I can't remember the exact word, but it's basically, consistency and behavior over and over and over and over again.
Rebuilds trust.
Rebuilds trust.
Because there is something to you think husbands and wives or friends, you forgive me, why don't you treat me different? I forgave you, and that's hard work to forgive you.
Yeah.
But trust is built back, and reconciliation kind of is on that path. For us to be back here, trust is part of that process, and say that one more time. The forgiveness isn't, but reconciliation requires.
Yeah, forgiveness is needed for reconciliation.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always lead to reconciliation.
Yeah.
But reconciliation needs forgiveness.
And you address that in your sermon, hey, that doesn't always look like this. So forgiveness mean I just let them back in? Does forgiveness mean we just push off the problems? Does forgiveness mean we just turn a blind eye to the pain you cause? No. Yeah. And there is an interesting, so everybody listening, their brain is full of all of their pain and situations, and there probably is wisdom to, hold on. You're forgiving them, and that's beautiful, but don't put yourself back in. We in our offices meet with people. They're well, hold on a second. I wouldn't give them the keys back. That's not wise. You're gonna hurt yourself and your family. So there is that side where not that you're not encouraging reconciliation, but wisdom in the midst of the process of forgiveness when there's danger or whatever. But on the other side, sometimes there can be you should probably go the path of reconciliation. You're fine. You're just mad. You're, because Jesus calls us to be ministers of reconciliation, and so. I wonder how often we don't go down that road of reconciliation because it is also hard, but it's necessary.
Yeah, it doesn't always seem fair.
Sure.
And my experience has always been the offender always wants it sooner than the offended.
I know.
Why can't we move on?
When I say my wife, when we get in an argument, it happens once every 5-6 years. My wife and I. That was a joke.
Wow.
But I will, I want to fix it up quick. I don't like having outstanding balances. And of course, usually it's I said something. I say a lot. And you're exactly right. Like, I'm the offender. I'm like, can we fix this now? And it's just like, give me a second. You're right. The offender wants to quickly get there. Yeah. But the offended.
Yeah. And like, to your point, sometimes the offended is like, I'm not ready, but that becomes a perpetual unreadiness.
Sure.
So there's kind of a both and to it.
Sure.
Of finding that, like, okay, I'm willing to, you've done a good job of building the trust back. I'm having a hard time still with feelings. So, just wrestling with that forgiveness and how, your relationship may feel different. But if, the goal is to restore to a certain point and reconcile.
Oh, man. Yeah. You've been doing, how long have you been pastoring for?
It's almost 30 years now.
Yeah, that I hear that speaking of, because you're exactly right. When you talk, like we talk about these things, here's what the scripture says. Here's what Christ calls us to. And that's the target. But the path there is exactly what you said, that timeline. I forget what word you just said that made me think of, like, when my emotions are, and when the offender wants to move it along and you're feeling hurt and you're like, whoa, hold on. Let's not just make it so we can go get fries tonight. Like, are you feeling this? Like, all those interpersonal things play through. And so it sometimes feels like, okay, does Jesus just give us 4 steps to get here? That path, you said the word, like, kind of perpetual unreadiness. You know what I mean? Like, because people are complex, there's just a lot to work through.
Right.
But the work is important. If the picture on the front of the box we're looking at is Christ. Yeah, but all those pieces you said are so true. In my own life, people I counsel with, people I have friendships with, it's messy because there's hurt. Are you actually feeling the weight of what you did? Because I don't
see it.
I want to trust you, but your willingness to move too quick or your attitude doesn't feel like you. And so those things, that's what makes it hard.
It's messy.
And then, of course, to the conflict, I want to get all like clinical on it, but you're bringing all the stuff in your backpack with you.
Right.
To use your analogy, you're like, well, I've had a lot of rocks from this relation. And so it all just makes it very real. Jesus empathizes with us in all that. And in the midst of all that, even if it's baby steps, calling it like the destination is forgiveness and reconciliation. And so it's so hard, but it's so beautiful and important to all that. What would you say? Maybe we end with this, just your pastoral word to, what would you say to someone who's listening and, to lack of a better word, going through the steps of forgiveness? They're trying to forgive, prayerful about it, trying to quote unquote do the right things to follow Jesus in this, but they're just like, but I do not feel it. And I still just can't. I don't even want to look at that person. What, like if someone was sitting in your office and they're like, I'm doing it, but I do not feel it. And maybe it's not been a week, maybe it's been months. What would you say to someone?
Yeah, I think I would go to that train illustration where in that case, the engine is the event. Yeah. And that event's making me feel a certain way. Yeah. And those feelings are keeping me from taking the action that needs to happen. Yeah. You replace that circumstantial engine with the engine of the gospel, and that affects how we act. Yeah. And that by doing the right thing, by forgiving, by showing grace and showing love, that then begins to impact our feelings. Yeah. And so the gospel switches that around. Corrie ten Boom, I sometimes use this illustration. Corrie ten Boom, who is a Holocaust survivor, was asked about something similar and about forgiveness. And I loved what she said. It's sort of like the bell ringer of a church bell. Yeah. Like they keep pulling the rope, and if you're continuing to live in unforgiveness, but you're forgiving, but you're continuing to pull that rope. Yeah. Like it's going to continue the ring. But what happens when they let go of the rope? It continues the ring, but it starts to ring less and less and less until finally it's still. Yeah. As soon as I let go, I'm willing to let go. Yeah. Then it's a process. It doesn't
Sure.
doesn't happen like this.
And I like it to be quick.
Right.
It's like, I want to feel different yesterday. I don't know if I've heard that analogy. That's a great picture of, in that surrender, it's not immediate. There's still going to be that remnant.
Yeah, you're still going to feel things.
Yeah. And I sometimes I'm reminded too, as I think of my own life, meet with people, different relationships, that just how trained we are for quick results. We say it all the time. Our phones are instant. McDonald's is instant. You can buy something on Amazon and get it tomorrow. All that stuff. Yes, I know. But it really does train. Like, Jesus plants seeds and uses farm analogies. James 5 talks about patiently praying like a farmer who's waiting through seasons. And it's like, what if it's years? What if it's decades? You know what I mean? Like, what if that's the speed at which the Lord works? You know what I mean? I want to be faithful to... Yeah,
well, I share that story of the family at Christmas Eve, and that was decades of prayer and forgiveness to get to that point where these families are sitting together, and then after the service, they're standing around talking to each other, and they're going to celebrate Christmas together.
Yeah.
And there's like a casual observer would never know the pain that was in all of that.
Yeah.
But it took over a decade to get to that point.
Yeah.
It does. It takes time.
And that's part of the uniqueness of the seats we sit in, is we walk with people that's like, this is too hard. And you're like, yeah, and you can see it. And we could probably start naming names of people in the church that like, yeah, that person over there, that they forgave. It's been years. You know what I mean? And this is how their heart has softened and how the relationship has changed. And that person chose to not hold on to it.
Yeah. And
the Lord has changed them from, death to life actually playing out in their lives by them choosing the gospel. And yeah, I love what you said. And let's end with this, that picture of where 2 or 3 are gathered, there I am. Like, where we are in the midst of this conflict and forgiveness together, Jesus is present with us. And holding to that, not forgetting that. Yeah.
I will preach.
It's powerful. I'll preach.